The podcast. It's good to be seen by you and good to be heard by you, those of you that are listening on the audio-only podcast version. It's Common Good Politics on the Vote Common Good Daily Podcast today. Hey, I'm Doug Pagitt and Robb Ryerse. We're going to be with you today as your hosts, and we're going to be talking about what our current political moment is all about and how we can be people of common good in the middle of it. As I mentioned, I'm Doug Pagitt. I'm in Minneapolis working, sitting down at my desk today. About every other day, Rob, I change around from standing up to sitting down. Just try to find my vibe. So, hey, if you're in the comments already on the live stream at any of the places, whether that's Facebook or that's on Twitter or over on Twitch or on Periscope or on Instagram or on YouTube, we'd love to have you tell us where you are and what it is that you are up to today, because we're trying to build a little community of common gooders. So, Rob, in just outside Fayetteville, Arkansas, what are you doing today, my friend? Where do you find yourself sitting on this fine Vote Common Good Tuesday?
Well, I'm sitting in my office at Vintage Fellowship in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and if you hear a little noise in the background, it's because our church building is being used by Department of Human Services for some visitation meetings, and there's some little kids running around today, and so apologize for any background noise, but I guess kids hanging out is a good reason for some.
Yeah, that's not so bad.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing on my day today. Well, you know what I did is we've been doing some redecorating in our house, putting in some new flooring, much needed flooring, and that produced the opportunity to go through all of our 6-year-old stuff, which I don't know if you've ever done that before. It's a truly miserable experience. Ended up with a couple of boxes of toys and things to donate, and Vanessa asked me to take them out to her car this morning. So I was taking them out to the car. I asked our 6-year-old to open the front door for me. When I did that, she noticed one of her toys in the box, and and said, Dad, are you going to donate that? That's my favorite toy. This toy that she hasn't played with for years. And so then there were tears and questions from my wife about whether or not I've ever done this before. And so that was my morning started with, breaking my daughter's heart.
Wow. Well played, Dad. And have you never given your child's toys away before? This is your 4th child. You think you would have learned this lesson?
Oh, I should. That is the point my wife was making. I should have known how to do this. That you sneak those out over cover of darkness.
Yeah, we all find ourselves trying to get rid of a little something that somebody wants us to keep. That's not a bad metaphor for life. If I was still a preacher, I would preach on Sunday, right? What are some things we have to get rid of that some other people really want us to hold on to? Well, around here on the podcast today, we're going to talk about impeachment the redux again. Hey, it's the week in which, once again, Donald Trump has to be held accountable by the people in the Senate after the House of Representatives impeached the man. So we'll be talking about that. We're going to talk about COVID relief plan and how we're thinking about that around here and what its impact on the common good is. We're also going to talk a bit about if unity is possible in this country. And this is a big question for a lot of us, is can we actually pursue something that looks like an us any longer in this country? Wouldn't have thought that was up for debate, when I was a younger man. But as I've gotten older and lived through the torment that has been the last 4 years of a particular brand of politics, I no longer know if I think it's true. And then we're going to ask the question, hey, is it too early to start thinking about November 8th, 2022? And the answer to that question, obviously, for those of us around Vote Common Good is nope, it isn't too early. But I want to talk about how we can get involved in all of that. All right, so Rob, let's do it. Let's talk about impeachment redux. The Donald Trump, as he was referred to on Saturday Night Live on Saturday, former social media influencer Donald Trump, which I thought was quite clever. Look, around Vote Common Good, we would love to just talk about the cleanup, the implications, ridding the country of the ism that was the Trump presidency. But we're not done with our work as a country yet, right? The actions of this man in the final months of his failed presidency continue to linger, and we just have to finish the cleanup. It's like getting home from a really long car trip, and you've spent so much time in the car, and the last thing you want to do is spend any more time in that car, and you pull up in your driveway, and you unload, and you get your stuff in the house, and then you realize the car's filthy. Like, some point we got to climb back in this thing. We got to vacuum it out. Maybe we got to air it out a little bit. We got to maybe get the Armor All wiping pads and kind of clean it up, right? We're in that moment with the Trump nonsense. Sure, he's no longer the president. And yesterday I said to Shelley, because he's in our frame again. Shelley's my wife. And I said to Shelley, man, you know what? Donald Trump just feels far less threatening to me now that he's not the commander in chief. Seems a little pathetic, frankly. But we're not done with the guy. We've got to finish this work. We'd like for you all to go over to votecommongood.com, click on our petition there, faith voters asking the Senate to find him guilty of the impeachment charges of inciting an insurrection, and we move on. But Rob, we're right back in it. We're back into another impeachment. It's been just a year, and here we go again. It's like the Super Bowl. Every time the Super Bowl comes around, so does an impeachment of Donald Trump.
Exactly. Yeah. We're right back here where we were a year ago, debating whether or not you could impeach a president in the last year of his presidency. Now we're debating whether or not you can impeach a president after he's left office. And so I think that really kind of is the initial question, is whether or not any of this is possible. If this is constitutionally permissible to impeach a president after they have left office, or if basically it's a statutes of limitations kind of thing, that once you've left office, you got away scot-free. That's really kind of the first question that's at hand, and there's not precedent for this. So this is a precedent-setting situation. What is decided is going to be the precedent that guides us for the remainder of our time as a republic, I suppose.
Yeah, I was thinking so many times over the last 4 years, there is nothing in our system that allows us to respond to a lawless president. A president that will violate norms, a president that will violate the law, a president that will violate the confidence of so many people. The kind of president who is not only named the president of the United States, but individual one in a crime, like Michael Cohen's crime, right? We don't have a mechanism for dealing with it. And I don't think we ever will. I think what we're saying as a country is this was a one-off. We don't want it to repeat. We don't want it to come back again. And we just have to be done with it. But we're vulnerable to another president at another time doing something that is also so far outside the bounds that our system doesn't respond well to it. And impeachment is an imperfect response to a president of the United States who incites an insurrection in his final 2 months in office. And this guy was building this thing. I mean, people can start watching the trial today, where, just to update people, because maybe this is the only place you're getting your impeachment news. And if that's true, thank you. It's nice to have you aboard.
Yeah.
But today, what they're going to do, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern time, is they're going to have the first of a couple of votes. The vote today is this actually constitutional? That's what they're going to vote on today. Now, see, a couple of weeks ago, Rand Paul, scallywag and troublemaker, and non-mask wearer and COVID super spreader, the guy who swam in the Senate swimming pool after he had his COVID test before he got back his results that came back positive. He was swimming in the pool. Now, not wearing a mask on the Senate floor, when it is the rule, libertarian and constitutionalist Rand Paul.
And hopefully a former senator defeated by my friend Charles Booker come 2022.
All right. Let's put that one in the
So
book.
I don't know anything Charles hasn't. Charles hasn't announced. That's purely just hope on my part.
Well, if he doesn't run, I'm moving to Kentucky. But anyway, Rand Paul a couple of weeks ago, when the Senate was taking up this idea of organizing for impeachment, he asked to have a debate about the constitutionality. And the Senate voted if they should have a debate about the constitutionality of impeaching President Trump, former President Trump, now that he's out of office. They didn't vote. The senators were not voting if they thought it was constitutional or not. They voted to the question, should they have a debate about it? That vote, that motion was voted down, but a number of Republicans voted to have a debate about it. And that little nuance has been spun repeatedly by people in the media as saying that these senators voted that the trial was unconstitutional. I don't mean to split hairs here, but many Republicans who voted to have a debate about the constitutionality a few weeks ago did not vote to say it was unconstitutional, even though those are the words being put in their votes, in their mouths. You would so say, right? So that's right. So, but today they are actually going to have that vote, Rob. Today they're going to vote to see if they believe this is constitutional or not to move ahead. And I think this is the vote that will telegraph what could happen for the final conviction or non-conviction on the charge, the impeachment charge that's been brought. So a little bit of drama still in the air, and this is what the senators are having to work out. And look, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, in very typical Donald Trump fashion, his legal team, which has changed often and pretty recently. I don't know about you, if I'm facing a really significant legal fight, I don't really want my lawyers to all quit like 3 weeks before the trial begins. I don't know about you. That seems like a bad sign. So Donald Trump's legal team filed their motions, their arguments, which included arguments against the constitutionality of trying an ex-president for impeachment. Though something tells me that if someone had filed impeachment charges against Barack Obama for some reason after his term ended, maybe they would have taken a different view on this. But anyways, they, in very typical Trump fashion, they quoted a constitutional law scholar, a professor by the name of Brian Colt, who is a professor at Michigan State University, who's written a paper on the constitutionality of trying and impeaching an ex-president, because Donald Trump has been impeached. We can be clear about the terminology. He has been impeached twice. This is about conviction and convicting him. And so he's written a paper on the constitutionality of that, and they quote him extensively in their arguments. The problem is that what Brian Colt does in his paper is he lays out all the arguments pro and con and tries to be honest about them, and then argues for his position. And they quote him laying out the arguments against the constitutionality of impeachment of a former president, representing him as
someone who's opposed
making that argument, which all he's doing is laying out the argument so that he can rebut it. So, they have used as their, primary source, someone who disagrees with their position, because they are woefully incompetent at what they do. And it just seems like it doesn't matter which lawyers the president brings around himself, the former president brings around himself. It is just woefully incompetent. over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. And yet he still may end up with the outcome that he's looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because here, look, here's the thing. And I'm no constitutional lawyer. I just like to say that the way other people on news programs say that, as if someone thought for a moment, perhaps I'm a constitutional lawyer. But just to be clear, I'm not. But look, Donald Trump was impeached while he was the president for actions he took while he was president. The fact that they've just now gotten to the trial is not to say that you can't impeach someone who's no longer president. You're not impeaching someone who's no longer president. He was already impeached, which is what the House does. Now he's tried as to the conviction of that impeachment. So the question is not, it is not, and I know, this is normally what I just run around my family room yelling at the television about. The question is not, can you impeach a former president? That's not what's happening here. The question is, can you try a person who was impeached as president after the impeached president has left office? Can you try that person in the Senate? Not can you impeach them? If the House of Representatives tries to pull up another impeachment charge against Donald Trump, then that becomes the question. Can you now impeach somebody who's no longer the president? I think that's a different calculation, which may have a different answer to it. I don't know. But that's a different calculation than, can you try a person who was impeached while the person was the president? And obviously you can, because they're doing it. Like, this is the thing. The Constitution doesn't determine every answer to all of these difficult questions. That's what we have representatives in a representative form of democracy. That's what they do, and that's what they need to do. And I think now look, it's a whole other question, Rob, frankly, whether Donald Trump incited the violence or not, right?
Yeah, before we jump into that question. Yeah, before we jump into that, but let me I want to make this point. We often think about impeachment and the conviction, the trial and conviction of a president by the Senate as the punishment for that being removal from office. So there becomes this thing of like, well, he's already left office. If the punishment is removal from office, if you convict him, what's the point? Well, removal from office is one of the punishments that comes along with being convicted, impeached and convicted by the Senate. And so that one punishment is no longer applicable because he's left office, but the other punishments for conviction, the other sentences, the other things that would be imposed upon him are tremendously important, including, not the least of which, is being barred from ever being able to run for office, federal office again, which I don't know about you, but I think all of us are hoping that, the next Trump that we have to deal with is, Don Jr. and not Don Sr. Because, frankly, we're going to have to deal with that at some point. Like, there are additional restrictions, including losing his presidential salary that he would have for the rest of his life. Number of other things that would be imposed on him if he's convicted. It is not just removal from office. So don't, for a dear listener, don't fall into kind of the trap of thinking, well, impeachment is just about removing from office. Those things are similar, but they are not synonyms. They're not they do not refer to the same thing. If you're convicted of your impeachment, yes, you are removed from office, but other punishments are imposed upon you. And it's those punishments, those consequences for his crimes that we want to see imposed upon Donald Trump.
Well said. Hey, and look, again, I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I just need to make that perfectly clear here. But I'm not any kind of a lawyer, frankly. If a person were convicted of a crime and they were in jail for their crime. And then it was discovered that they committed another crime. And this person's in jail for the remainder of their life. Would you say that the person then should not be tried for that additional crime, because that additional crime's punishment is they would go to jail, but they're already in jail, so you wouldn't try them because the punishment now wouldn't do any extra effect on the person because they're already in jail? Somebody wouldn't say that, right?
Right.
I know that impeachment is not a legal proceeding, and Donald Trump is not being charged with a legal crime. He's being charged with a political crime. But it's this argument, the same argument, that you can't hold someone to something if, to your point, every punishment is not currently available to you. Put it this way, does that mean that a second-term president who incites an insurrection in their final months in office could never be tried because the person now can't rerun for office because we have a limit on the number of times that a president can be the president? So in other words, no, you might say, well, no, we don't want the person being a senator either. We want to make sure that all the privileges of federal office are removed from this person for violating their oath while they were in a federal office. Might you also say the same thing to a senator who needs to be impeached? And the person does something while they're a senator, then they leave office for whatever reason, their term is up or they just quit. And then you say, well, hey, we can't try him now. We can't impose any kind of a future ramification on them because they're no longer in office. That just makes no sense.
Right.
Now, I think most everyone we know knows that don't make no sense. Rob, I remember when you and I were walking 135 miles from Charlottesville to Washington, D.C., and we were demonstrating on the highways with the escorts from the state highway patrol in Virginia while we were exercising our freedom of expression to say that Black Lives Matter while we were walking in to join the Get Your Knee Off Our Neck rally in Washington, D.C. in August. And people would drive along on the highway and give us a toot of affirmation. We think this is great what you're doing with this crowd of people taking up a lane of the highway. And then I remember a particular person driving up next to us, and she had her window down, and she's going 4 miles an hour, maybe 3 miles an hour, very slowly by us. And she leans out toward the window and yells, "You're walking on the highway. That don't make no sense." It was just a great moment, to which Shane Claiborne responded, "Racism? Well, that don't make no sense." And we started into this "that don't make no sense" bit. There's just so many things that have come back to me in this moment that makes me think, well, there's a whole lot of things that don't make no sense. And so I really hope that what happens today is the Republicans are able to overcome this constitutionality argument, and they can be more clear today than they were weeks ago when Rand Paul put together his little stunt and then mischaracterized the meaning of that vote. Now, if 50 senators or 48 senators or 45 senators all vote it's unconstitutional to pursue this, I think we're into a whole other territory at that point, that these people are trying to make some kind of a constitutional argument that frankly is not theirs. Now, they may want to say, we think it's inappropriate. We think it's inappropriate for the Senate to do it. Great argument. Make that one. But don't act as if, like you're middle management and you're throwing your hands up and saying, well, what's a senator to do? I would love to pursue this, but, really, if, you got to talk to the boss. Nothing I can do about it.
Do you know, Doug, if this requires 60 votes, or is this a 51 vote requirement?
I learned this information this morning, so I do. And again, not a constitutional lawyer, but they only need a simple majority to move forward. So
Good.
if 50 senators, and I don't know who splits the tie. I think again it might be Vice President Harris who splits the tie. Even on this, it's a little unclear because this impeachment, and we'll be done talking about this in a minute, but this impeachment's a little different because it's not even being overseen by the Chief Justice, because the implication of a guilty verdict is not to remove a sitting president. The implication is to apply the other consequences, and it's not that one. So that's why the Chief Justice is not involved in this. And I believe it's the pro tem of the Senate,
Yeah,
which is
Patrick
just,
Leahy.
I like these cute, I like these, other titles that people are given from the Latin, the protest.
Yeah.
All right,
So
so we're going to
let's.
be talking about this
So
all
we.
week. We won't.
Yeah.
I
So we.
promise people on the podcast we won't talk about Donald Trump incessantly. We just need to clean the car. We got to get all this done. We got to move on at some point, and we're not done with our work as a country yet.
Yeah. So I mean, there's two things, and I think we're definitely in agreement on the first, and I'm curious about the second. Those two things are, number one, did he do it? Right? Like, and I think we're agreed. Yeah, he did. He is guilty of this crime. And he did incite an insurrection. And so absolutely. So that's the first question. Then the second question comes along is, what do you think the Senate's going to do? And, do you want to make your, I don't know who you had in the Super Bowl, but like, you want to make your bold impeachment prediction. I'm happy to go first. I don't think the Senate is going to convict him for two reasons. One, if there was a secret ballot, I think they would convict him. I think for some reason, Donald Trump, as many bullies do, lives rent-free in the minds of many Republican senators in a way that is inexplicable to me. And he continues to do so. And so I don't think there are enough Republican senators. So I believe that if given the opportunity to convict him without, personal consequence to themselves, I think the Republican senators would do it. There would be Republican senators joining Democrats, and we would have a conviction. But without a secret ballot, I don't think he's going to be convicted. The other reason I don't think he's going to be convicted is because I believe that, and I don't have any proof of this other than 4 years of paying very close attention to Donald Trump and having a good sense of like how this stuff works, almost a year of accurately predicting stuff on our This Guy's Got to Go podcast, right? So I think that what Donald Trump has done is, I believe he has threatened Republican Party leadership and said, if I am convicted, I will start the Patriot Party. And the way to keep me from starting a third party with my followers is to make sure I'm not convicted. And I think, and if Donald Trump, the implications of that, if Donald Trump were to start his own party, start the Patriot Party, the Republican Party would lose elections for generations to come. And so I think at the end, these Republican senators are going to do what they have consistently done throughout the Trump presidency, and that is put their own political party aspirations and the fortunes of their political party ahead of what is good for the country. I think they know that if they convict Donald Trump, he will start his own party, and it will be the end of the Republican Party as a viable party in the country, and they're not going to let that happen. They would rather keep the Republican brand, keep their own opportunity to stay in power, put that ahead of law and order and justice and the American way and all of that. I don't know, Doug. What are your thoughts? Do you think they're going to convict?
Well, let me ask you this: what's your number of senators that you think will vote to convict? This is now on Monday, and the trial hasn't officially started. So, with no particular arguments in the fray, what's your? Do you have a number?
Well, the last time, the only Republican senator who joined the Democrats was Mitt Romney. I expect that he will do that again. But the Ben Sasses, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski's of the world are like Lucy with the football, who consistently yank it away. And so I tend to think the number is going to be, I'll say 52.
Okay.
I'll say 52. I think one of them will go along. I think it'll be Mitt Romney plus Lisa Murkowski or Susan Collins or Ben Sass.
So you're saying Mitt Romney with a +1.
Yes.
Mitt Romney.
Mitt in a date.
Mitt in a date. All right. Well, hey, great analysis, Rob. I fear you're right. I fear, look, I used to think the Republicans were being strategic and trying to manage the Donald Trump force. I've stopped believing that. I just think you'd be a fool. I'd be a fool if I continued to think that, because they are the Donald Trump party. It's not that they're trying to reconcile and how do we bring this closer to they want the same things that Trump wants. Adam Kissinger, the congressman who has started now this pack to try to speak out against Trump. You know who I'm speaking of. If you don't know, friends, look him up. He's now getting all this credit for being a Republican with some conviction. He voted for Trump in 2020 and said because he likes his policies. Then when he lost and incited an insurrection, now he's all up in arms. Republicans are for Trump. That's it. It's not that they've never struggled with reconciling this. They have been for this guy. They have supported him. They're there all along. Now, are there some split offs? I think the number will be 56. I think 6 Republicans are going to vote to convict Trump. I think that's going to be enough for the Republican Party to hint that it could save its own soul, and then there will be a whole collection that think he's not guilty, and there'll be a whole collection that'll still be griping about the constitutionality, and that's how they will explain themselves. And then, like everything else, we will just move on, and people will stop thinking about it, and they'll stop worrying about it. So I think that's the number. Look, I think Donald Trump was not only guilty of inciting an insurrection on January 6th, that morning, when he invited people to his house. It was a house party. They did it on the White House property, right? He had a party, invited people to it. For what purpose? To pressure senators and House representatives to not certify the Electoral College results. That's why they were there. Then he told them to walk down the street to the Capitol. Then what they did at the Capitol, they're acting like, well, now that wasn't his problem. If that's not incitement, I don't know what it is. But he didn't just incite on January 6th. He incited on December 4th. He incited on August 24th. Like, before the election, he was saying it's rigged. Before the election, he was saying we have to fight this at every level. They were involved in court cases in April to try to say that the way voting is going to be done in these states, they don't agree with. So they have been plotting a psychological and physical insurrection for months. It's just madness to suggest that they were doing anything other than wanting to pressure the vice president and the Senate and the House of Representatives to not certify the votes. And that in and of itself is an insurrection. I mean, I would almost go so far as to say the man should be impeached. If nobody broke a door down, he should still be impeached. What he was trying to get them to do was to believe lies about this election that did not come from the facts on the ground. He just literally said repeatedly, the only way I could lose this election is if it's rigged. Honestly, that is a violation of your duty as the president to uphold the Constitution. To impugn the system of voting in this country, to say that the only way you would not win is if it's rigged, that in and of itself is a violation. So, look, we got to be done with this guy. It's time for this guy to go, as we like to say around here, and he's got to get out of our minds, and we need to find him guilty and move on. All right, so that's point. Obviously, we won't spend the same amount of time on each of these topics, but COVID stimulus. What do you think about the COVID stimulus? $1.9 trillion, which I learned last night, Rob, as we turn our attention now to this big, important topic. Do you know what the price tag was that was put on the 2017 tax giveaway? $1.9 trillion. $1.9 trillion, of which the Republicans were totally comfortable having that kind of a wealth redistribution happen to the wealthy. But now it happens to average citizens. And I'm telling you, these people all of a sudden are acting as if, fiscal responsibility. And what if somebody gets something they don't deserve? It's as if these people are socialists when it comes to the wealthy and capitalists when it comes to the poor. Giveaways
You're
for the
ranting
wealthy.
about the Republicans. I want to rant about the Democrats. Why are the Democrats so bad at this?
What are they bad at? Tell me. What are they bad at right now? What's not going? What's not going right?
You promised.
I like where it is. I think it's good. What do you think?
You promised $2,000 checks.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't promise. You didn't campaign on, if we elect Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff in Georgia. Joe Biden didn't go to Georgia and say, if you elect these guys, we'll finish the job and send $1,400 checks so that you have $2,000 total. That was not the promise that was made. The promise that was made was, if you elect that, don't equivocate.
You're saying that the original call.
They are so
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. You're saying the original plan.
They made a promise to the American people that if they took the Senate, they would send $2,000 stimulus checks. And now they're not.
No, here's what the promise was that was made.
You can parse it all you want and make the point of they're just finishing the job. But the political optics of this are idiotic.
Rob,
you're doing is, this is a no-win situation where all you're doing is making yourselves look bad. This is an unforced error on the part of the Democrats where they could simply say, hey, we're delivering on our promise. But instead, what they're doing is they're arguing about what the definition of $2,000 is.
No, well, here's what the promise was back in November and October and September from Democrats was, we need to get $2,000 payments to Americans. It was not a check for $2,000. In fact, I didn't get my $600 in a check. It came in a bank transfer, right? So it was not, you're going to get one piece of paper with a 2 and a comma and a 0 and a 0 and a 0 and a dot and a 0, 0. It was not a $2,000 check. It was $2,000 payments need to go to every American making under X amount of dollars. The fact that they could get 600 of that moved out before the new Congress came into place, and now they're going to finish that so that the full $2,000 is made. I don't think that is playing semantics. I think that was the promise. Why do you see it as different? You don't think the $600 that many people already received ought to count?
Was it down payment on the $2,000? No, that was not what Joe Biden, John Ossoff, and Raphael Warnock campaigned on in Georgia.
You're saying that their campaign promise was you will now get $2,600, $600 you already got.
The 600 had already gone. 600 was already happening at that point. This was a promise of $2,000. And just the fact that we have to argue about this, just the fact that this is a discussion.
I didn't even know anybody was arguing about this. I literally didn't.
You're not paying attention to the right points. And then, okay, so if you are correct, Doug, in saying that the $600 was the first payment in the total of $2,000, then why are the Democrats now moving the goalposts in terms of who gets the remainder of the payment? Why is it now being shifted from $75,000 a year annual income to $50,000 a year annual income? So people in a third of the people, I don't know what the numbers are, but people that fit in that bracket between $50,000 and $75,000 are not getting the $2,000 that was promised in September, October, and November, but are rather only getting $600. So either way, the Democrats are not delivering on the promises made, and it makes no sense.
Wow.
This is an easy win. This is a layup. I've used a lot of sports metaphors. This is an easy win for them, and they're giving it away, and it makes no sense to me.
Well, I don't think they're giving it away. In fact, I think they have held the line that they're going to make a $1,400 next payment. Because look, the other alternative that the Republicans want is less than $1,400. I thought that was the argument that was going on, is did it ultimately need to be $2,000? I think they need to hold to that. And then the threshold becomes another question, right? Does I've never heard someone say, and maybe that's happened recently, from $75,000 down to 50. I heard it was from $100,000 down to 75. Now I know there's a lot of proposals being floated on this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a guy in our comments. There's a guy in our comments who says, I think Gary West, who says, I think anyone with half a brain understood that it would be $2,000 total. So apparently Gary thinks that I don't have half a brain.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't make that correlation.
Appreciate that.
But I think here's the larger question to all of this, which I think your comments bring up so well, which is, when a party gets elected, how much do they get to say, hey, this is what we said, and that's all? Or does the elected party say, here's what we said, but now we have to include the other party in these decisions? I think on COVID response and COVID relief, the Democrats should not worry about including the Republicans. There's other issues down the road that they can worry about including the Republicans. And here's why. When the Republicans had control of the Senate, these same people, the same ones, they did not solve for this problem. They had a chance to solve for this problem. Americans voted, and now Democrats need to say, look, we're going to take care of this, and we'll be glad to include you in the future on other issues around which we can find some commonality, because it's clear we're not going to find it on this one. And you cannot screw up underfunding the stimulating of the economy in response to COVID. We are almost at the point. I mean, we are so close to states feeling comfortable reopening, to the vaccine being distributed to a satisfactory level, and for the economy to start to have its next iteration. The idea that you would say, let's give people less money to make that happen, because again, and I know it's not Friday, we're going to talk about economics, the government doesn't spend money. The government redistributes money. All this stuff about that Republicans said for all these years, you know how to spend money better than the government. Well, all of a sudden, they don't think people know how to spend the money better than the government. Think about what Republicans are saying. Don't give it to people because they won't spend it. Keep it, and we'll figure out how to spend it. Like somehow these Republicans are playing Freaky Friday again with everything they've ever used to say. They've switched sides once again on the thing that they used to hold to, because their notions have never made sense. It's been a house of mirrors the entire time. And conservatism and libertarianism, in my view, has just shown itself in the last 4 years to simply be a false front. It's a fake storefront. There's nothing in the store. And we see it most clearly now in the COVID response. What do you think about the $15 minimum wage? Do you think that should be included in this? That's the one piece I've been confused about. And I know that, Congresswoman Jaribold from the Progressive Caucus makes a strong argument for this. I'm all for a $15 minimum wage. In fact, if we're not going to go all the way to cash payments being made to every American, which I think is the only way we can actually have a fair economy, if we're going to still make hourly wages the requirement, which is where it's going to be for now, then make the federal minimum wage $15, no problem. But I think it should be a separate bill, so every senator and every House member has to look that one square in the eye and say yes or no. I don't think it should be buried in the stimulus. What do you think?
Right. And because minimum wage is a winning issue across the country, in red states, minimum wage, raising the minimum wage when it's on the ballot wins. It did in 2020 in Florida, where Donald Trump and the minimum wage both won the state of Florida. It did here in Arkansas in 2018, where raising the minimum wage in a bright red state won. It is a winning issue. And so, I think you could be right that burying this in a procedure, in a
reconciliation
procedure,
bill, yeah,
misses the opportunity to have a political win and to galvanize the American people behind an issue that they really support. And so I personally think raising the minimum wage is tremendously important. And if this is the way it gets done, fantastic.
You know what I wish they'd include in a minimum wage argument? A carve out for teenagers in teenage jobs who are not heads of households. Now, I know that sometimes when people say don't pay teenagers $15 while they work at the movie theater, some people are like, look, there are teenagers who have to fund their own life. Okay, find a way to work around that. But for the most part, new employees working at a fast food place when they're 15 years old and they're swinging, like there can be some gradation up, right? Heads of household, people that are filing independently can be paid this amount. Like there's some things you can do, but because this is what people who are against the minimum wage push back on all the time. They're just like, no, like seriously, like a 15-year-old kid's supposed to make that kind of money? And then the conversation just devolves into an argument. I think there's a way to make it 18 years old and up and solve for that problem in any other way and make this a serious conversation about whether or not the federal government has the right to tell employers how much they can pay. Because if we don't have that conversation as a country, we're just going to bury this issue and basically, not talk about why we always fight at Thanksgiving and as a family and bury that down deep. And the next Thanksgiving, you know what's going to happen? People are going to start fighting again. And it's never going to get solved. And I think this is such an important issue. They shouldn't put it into a reconciliation bill. They should allow for Republicans and Democrats across the board to have to argue for or against and to break this thing out. I wish they would do it. I don't think they're going to. I think it's going to be in this bill. And then it's going to feel like, and then people will argue about the process again because the radical Republican Party will just continue to argue about process, and that's what's going to happen going forward.
Yeah, and a couple of things, but from what you said, one is, it's a settled issue on whether or not the federal government can tell a business how much they pay their employees, because they do right now. They say, $750. Like they already do. Like that's a non-issue. It should be. This is a settled issue. Now it simply becomes, now it's negotiating on how much. I think the other, and I think you're right about like the teenager objection can be solved for pretty easily. And the other objection that can be solved for really easily is the cost of goods question. Like if we raise the minimum wage, doesn't that mean the cost of everything's going to go up? And you look around and you say, okay, the minimum wage hasn't gone up since when was it? 2007,
15 years ago. Yeah.
Has the cost of anything gone up?
45 cents, right?
Like what did a Big Mac cost in 15 years ago compared to today? The cost of stuff has gone up. The cost of goods increasing is not tied to employee wages. Like the cost of goods has gone up already. You know what else has gone up? The CEO salaries have gone up pretty significantly over the same period of time. So, let's decouple these things that do not belong together. It's a faulty argument that needs to be rejected. And, you can look not just over the last 15 years here in our country, but you look around the world where workers are paid significantly higher and the cost of goods, is not like proportion. It's not that a Big Mac costs $33. Come on, it's ridiculous. So, I just think I think you're right that like it would be really good for us as a country to have a strong, robust debate about this issue, and I think it would be a winning one for Democrats, quite frankly. But that being said, if we get increasing the minimum wage through the reconciliation process, like I said, I think the ends are more important than the means in this case.
Well, I think you're right on that. Hey, and one of the things that I would love to see happen on this is actually combine the base minimum income narrative with the minimum wage. And here's what I mean. You place a federally mandated minimum wage, and then employers are reimbursed by the government for that difference for a period of time so that businesses don't have to say, we've taken it on the chin. In other words, you phase it in, not by adding 50 cents a year for the next 16 years. You phase it in by having a reimbursement to employers for the increased minimum wage. And there's a means by which you can distribute income in a redistributive income model through employment. So there's a way to get to both base minimum income. In other words, that the government's going to guarantee that people are paid a certain amount of money so they can live on it, like we do for a lot of other people. We do it for retirees. We do it for people in federal pension plans. We do it for people that are on disability. There's a whole lot of our society that already receives this. The problem is not everybody who needs it receives it. So there's some creativity. But again, as Julie mentions on Facebook, the minimum wage needs a better explanation, definition, and better branding. But we never get to have this conversation because we keep arguing about, what about the poor employer? And again, the government, a creative person on the minimum wage could solve this question by saying, how about if we create a reimbursement so that we know that the business is not going to suffer, and that we put that burden on the federal budget, which I think is where these kinds of things should come from. Anyway, all right, you ready to move on to number 3?
I am.
We've only got a couple of minutes. Yeah, you know what our problem is with having 4 topics? We talk too long about everything. All right,
we do.
Is there a path forward as a country? Is unity the path forward? Is there really any way forward for this country, Rob? We're at Vote Common Good. We're all about having people make the common good their voting criteria, not being a Republican, not only being a Democrat, not being an independent, and sure, for the goodness of all, don't be a libertarian. But could you call people to some kind of a way forward that involves some kind of unity that's not uniformity? That's not simply giving it all up to simple platitudes of, hey, can't we all just get along?
Yeah. And I think, we could set this topic up by referencing the Jeep Bruce Springsteen commercial that aired during the Super Bowl about the middle and the reunited states of America that's connected by by reclaiming the middle ground. And that was an interesting commercial for a couple of reasons. And I texted you right after it aired to see if you were watching. And because
I'm a Bruce Springsteen fan, but maybe it was for other reasons too.
Oh, exactly. And I was going to say, because, you and I are both Springsteen fans, and you're one of the biggest Springsteen fans I know, and also because of some of the imagery that is in the commercial is related to the intersection of religion and politics, which is kind of where we've lived for the last couple of years. So it was really fascinating, and the commercial was really well made and really emotionally impactful and moving, and I really enjoyed it. And then, like, the backlash happened.
It didn't take long.
No, it didn't. And the backlash is basically bringing up this question of, is there middle ground with white supremacists? Is there common ground? Is there unity with people who would, storm the Capitol or would support the storming of the Capitol? Like, is this even something? And calls for that seem maybe a bit tone deaf right now. It's a really complicated question. I thought that a Trump or that a Biden presidency would usher forward a time in which the American people would want to experience some type of healing, and that there would be some movement towards that in a non-political or nonpartisan way.
Yeah.
And that still might be the case, and that might be what the majority of kind of everyday Americans want. I think there's going to be real opposition to that from certain segments that say, hey, how can we have that with people who don't recognize our right to live, our right to have liberty, our right to pursue happiness in this country? Like this, we've got a friend, Michael Waters, who talks about how like this idea of going back to normal is like that we shouldn't want to go back to normal because normal wasn't a good state. So is this unity that we're looking for, is this unity a return to normal, or is it a birth of something new that we can experience together? That's a question that, if it's a return to normal, if that's what we mean by unity, then I think we need to heed the voices that say that's not what we want. But if this call for unity is somehow a birth of something new that we experience together, that that doesn't further marginalize and oppress people, and if that's possible, then then I would be all for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
What are your
I
thoughts?
think I think that's the dilemma, right? Is unity saying, well, every broken opinion, every bad view of one another has to be included as equally as important as the better ideas? I don't think it does. I don't think the only way forward for a country in something that feels like an us, whether you call that unity or you call that a new middle, or you call us meeting in a shared place. Look, we share this country with people who believe dangerous things. And people who I vehemently disagree with would say amen to that because they think I believe the dangerous thing. I read the comments on the YouTube version of that commercial this morning. There's 35 million views and lots of comments. And 35 million views is a lot, and 11,000 comments is a lot. And it's people on both sides of the political aisle saying, there ain't going to be no unity. There is no coming together. And then lots of commentary around that. And I don't think the commercial is broken. I think what the commercial does, like any piece of art, is it prompts us to ask what's in us. And there's something in us that's asking the question, can there be in us?
Yeah.
Now look, this is the thing we've been about for the whole history of this country, right? I mean, there was a revolution in which some people were on the side of England. There was a civil war in which people were on the side of slavery. There were breaks in the 20s and 30s in which people were on the side of capitalism against common people. There were breaks in the 60s when people were on the side of continued systemic racism rather than togetherness. There were breaks at every period of time in our history. We are not in an unusual moment of division. Division is what this country has always experienced. The question is there an us in the midst of that division? And can anyone call for that without somehow being put on the side of you are simply trying to say that the issues that matter to so many of us don't matter? I don't know. I really don't know if the grand experiment of the United States was ever possible and is possible now or will be possible in the future. I think we're going to decide that. I think there was a whole lot of ugly division that went on in this country. all the way up until now. I mean, so I was really influenced by someone's comment the other day when they said, seeing a Confederate flag carried through the Capitol building on January 6th. And this person said, there's been a Confederate flag hanging in the Capitol building embedded in the Mississippi flag. Yeah. Like, let's not fool ourselves that there haven't been people holding to the Confederate narrative and that we haven't had it on flags in the Capitol building. So was there ever an us? Will there ever again be an us? And how can we think about and talk about these things? It's a pending question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just looking at one of the comments that we've gotten, on our feed right now that brings this up. There's someone whose username, and I don't know what platform this comment's coming from, but someone's username is Adolf Hitler Rises Again, White Power. And they commented on our podcast here saying, Trump was robbed. The world knows it. Shame on BLM, the racist thugs. Like, is there an us there? Like,
yeah.
And what is that? And what does that look like? I mean, these are really big existential issues that we've got to wrestle with.
Frankly, is this a politician's question or is this a citizen's question? If the question of, is there an us? Yes. Do we outsource that to our politicians or do we take that on ourselves? This is our question.
And who are the people, who are the moral voices that can lead us and guide us in this? Who are, the voices like a Martin Luther King Jr., who in the 60s, through the midst of great conflict and opposition, was able to provide a voice that over time, prevailed. And how, who are those voices now that are going to sound out the truth that guides us to where we need to go? I think that it's important for us to be listening for them and to them.
Yeah, it is just such a powerful question. And look, it's not only true in our government. It's not only true in our civic life. This is true in our churches. This is true in our workplaces. This is true in our entertainment. This is true in our families. Like this question of humanity. Will we be tribes warring with one another, or will we create something of a collective us? Man, look, and to put only the weight on the government is a mistake, and to not put the weight on the government is a mistake, right? It's. I was in Arizona, and we were up in Sedona, and they have this great little rock formation that's called the Devil's Bridge. I don't know if you've ever seen the Devil's Bridge when you're up there, but it's between two tall rock formations that you climb up, and then it's like a 4.5, 5 foot wide rock formation that goes between two pillars, right? It's naturally formed, and you can walk on this thing. And it's called the Devil's Bridge because if you step too far to the left, you fall the 30 feet down there. If you step too far to the right, it's just a narrow, it's like a plank, like you're walking a plank. And that idea that either way you go, you're going to fall. That's where we find ourselves so often in so many things in our world, right? That we're walking this path that's treacherous with many errors. And it's not true that going forward is your only option on the Devil's Bridge. To turn around and go back. This is a real question for us. And can there be a United States of America or not? And I don't know. I mean, I think we're in a great experiment, but it's also an experiment we have about any other group of people that we're with that we're trying to find in us.
Yeah.
In our capacity, strong or weak, to have in us. All right, final topic, and we'll wrap this up here in a minute. Rob, it is by series calculation from my phone, 637 days until our next full election in this country. November 8th, 2022, there will be a federal election for senators, some of them. I can't remember how many are up, but a bunch. And for all the people who have run for the House of Representatives and our congresspeople. 637 days. Too soon to talk about that? We don't think so around Vote Common Good. In fact, we work with candidates now, and candidates are training. And I would like for you to think about this podcast, friends, this podcast as like your weekly training workout to get yourself ready for Election Day. Because it's not only candidates that should be preparing for Election Day, voters have to prepare for Election Day. How are we thinking about these issues? Think about how much you've changed, friends, listening to this, how much you've changed from 2 years ago or 4 years ago or 6 or 8 years ago. People change. Are you going to change over the next 2 years? Where's this going to go? How are you going to learn? How are you going to extend? Are you going to grow? This is our big question. Can people actually prepare themselves so that when Election Day comes, it's not a surprise? Now, Rob, in 2018, we were traveling the country trying to ask people to help flip Congress. That's when it was in the hands of the Republicans, and we thought you got to pull this away from the then president of the United States, because he's gonna hurt this country if we don't put a limit on him. And we met so many people all around the country that said, it's 2018. Why is there an election? A lot of people don't know that every 2 years there's elections for people in the House of Representatives. Every 4 years, there's an election for the President of the United States and Vice President of the United States. Every 6 years, a term of the Senate is up. So elections are kind of happening every day. And then in the off years, there's even some other kinds of elections that go on. Our call to our representative form of government is sort of ongoing, and we're 637 days away from a real doozy. And Rob, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but you could share a little bit about what we're doing around the Vote Common Good world with the politicians that we're talking with.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is help candidates for office, whether they are new candidates or incumbents who are in office, be able to talk about their own faith journey in an authentic way. To talk about issues that matter to them in ways that will resonate with religiously motivated voters, and to talk with a moral authority on issues that will help galvanize public opinion. We think that the religious right has co-opted and hijacked the relationship between faith and politics, and frankly perverted that for the power and the gain of certain people who want that kind of influence. And so what we're trying to do is wrest from their control, to wrest free this idea that people of faith, people of no faith, can be involved in politics, and people's faith can be a motivating factor for them, and when it comes to how they engage in politics. And that doesn't have to look like, winning America back for Jesus. And it doesn't have to look like just figuring out, how I can stay in power and how I can have what's best for me. It could actually look like greater love, greater justice, greater peace in our world. And we're trying to help voters figure that out, and candidates figure that out as well.
Well said. Hey, if you like this podcast, go over to votecommongood.com/podcast. You find a place to subscribe, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching this on the video live streams, really take a minute and go subscribe to the podcast. It super helps us. Really, truly it does. Because the more subscribers we have, the more we're able to stay in touch with people in a whole lot of ways and attract attention to this. If you're watching this on the social streams, know that we're also on some of the other ones. So maybe if you're on Facebook, you want to know that we're over on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, we're also over on Twitch, or whatever you put together. Hey, and if you're on right now, tag a friend. Tell them you're watching this. Tag their name in it. Spread the word. Share it around. We want you to do that. And you don't only have to do that today, because on Mondays, it's Common Good News, where we talk about news that happened. I had a great conversation yesterday with Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove about the news that's coming out of the insurrection and what happened that day. Of course, Tuesdays, it's Politics Day around here, so we talk about politics. On Wednesdays, We talk about common good faith with Laura Truax and Stephanie Spalding and Dominique Gilliard and myself. That's going to, tomorrow, you're going to love it. It's such a great conversation with this great co-hosting set. And on Thursdays, we talk about issues. The next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about the issue of abortion, how abortion is not just a political issue, but how can we engage with it as human beings, one another, and as our government. So we're going to be talking about important issues that matter to us on Thursdays, abortion over the next couple of weeks. And then on Friday, we talk about science, both the physical sciences and also the science of economics. We'll be talking about economics and economic theory and all that on Friday. So lots of ways for you to be involved in all of this. Subscribe on the channel, share it with friends, tag people, subscribe to the podcast, head over to Vote Common Good. Don't miss the donation link when you're over there. It really helps us keep all this going, and we're glad to have you. Rob, this looks like you got a final thought.
Should we tease our big guest for next week?
If you're comfortable, yeah, I think we should tell people that there might be a little something fun going on the Tuesday edition of the Daily
I mean,
Podcast.
everything is subject to change, as you know, but next week we are, at least at this point, scheduled to have live with us a pretty big guest, none other than Congresswoman Katie Porter.
How do you like that? Katie Porter might be on here with us. Katie Porter has proven herself to be a common do-gooder herself, and such a good booster of this. We look forward to that day so much. All right. So, any final sign-offs, Rob? Or you got any last good words for the good people as they pursue a little faith, hope, and love for the common good in our world?
I don't, but I'm going to think about that from now on.
You're going to come up with a big sign-off statement?
Yeah, we need a goodbye and good night kind of thing.
A big closing phrase. Hey, good luck out there, everybody. Hey, thanks for being a part of this, and share it with your friends, and let's build a community of the common good.